Wait.
I think you should do an introduction to the pod.
Introduction?
Yeah, one of you two should introduce it to give some context.
Introduce us.
Okay, welcome to the Curious Growth.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Welcome to the Curious Growth Cast episode 001. Today's topic is, should you or should you not vote?
You should.
We will find out who is defending which point of view in a moment. On this side, we have Josh Lee. On this side, we have Lev. I don't know your last name.
That's totally fine. Gatman Siegel.
Gatman Siegel.
Yeah.
Two opponents ready to rumble. All right.
Okay.
We will start with Josh. You have 2 minutes to explain your point of view.
And go.
All right, so I'll just start with some basic moral / ethical intuitive truths. I'm going to say that you shouldn't kill people, you shouldn't steal from people, you shouldn't coerce people to do things that they don't want to do. Those are all very bad, and if any group of people does that, you would want to have nothing to do with them. So, starting there. So I'll just say, hypothetically, that's super helpful. Thanks. Gotta talk faster. Oh my God. I'm already a quarter of the way done. I haven't even started. Okay. So if a group of people that were running a company, I think we could take Jeff Bezos because that came up earlier. So if Amazon was running a company and they were killing people in other countries and stealing money from people in this country and giving it to other people in this country, we would all consider that to be very bad and wrong, and we wouldn't want to deal with Amazon. We wouldn't shop from Amazon. We wouldn't have anything to do with Amazon. So if Amazon said, well, the only reason why we're doing this is because you need to come vote in a better CEO because Jeff Bezos is obviously the wrong man for the job. I would say that no one would go to that election because we wouldn't want to deal with a mass murderer who's stealing from people and killing people in other countries. We just wouldn't participate in that election. We wouldn't even try to elect a new CEO because I would say it would probably just keep doing what they're doing. So I think there's not a clear difference in my mind between that and what the government's doing. Government's just a group of people in the US in particular who are killing people in other countries and are stealing from people in this country to give the money that they steal to other people. Like Social Security is a good example of that. So I think we wouldn't want to participate in an election to elect a new president because for the same reason, Jeff Bezos.
No, that's it. Next.
Okay, so
Wait. Ready?
but I'm just saying my statement. I can't respond to any of the crazy stuff he's just said.
Okay. Ready?
Okay, cool.
You just give your...
Yeah. So, voting. Very, I would say, big and important part of how our system in this country and most countries currently works, most democratic countries, and some ones that aren't either. But yeah, voting. The thing about voting is that as a citizen, I would say that you have a moral, ethical right to vote and need to vote because that's how you affect how you live. It's really hard saying anything without responding to what you said, but the deal is 2 minutes is not long enough.
It's okay, you got this.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give you more time too.
No, yeah, of course. Thank you. But this is my opening speech, so if you could not talk, that'd be great. You have to vote. It should be a thing that is a necessity for you in your life. It affects your life. It affects the lives of people around you. I think if you don't vote because it doesn't affect you, it is a very selfish overall view of going, it doesn't affect me. I shouldn't vote. I'm well off or privileged for whatever reason. There's people who aren't, and it is your right as a human being to help those people who can't vote for whatever reason. If there are immigrants or criminalized because they sold weed, which is now legalized everywhere, and they cannot vote for the rest of their lives, that stuff is insane. So you should vote for those people. You should vote for yourself. You don't have to vote I mean, you should vote, but it's not just about who you're picking for president. There's propositions coming up all the time for both the U.S. and specifically the state that you live in.
Get a couple more seconds since he talked.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay.
How about we continue with 5 minutes each from now on?
Okay, cool.
I want to give Lem a chance to reply to what I said.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
feel like that threw you.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Do you want
It was
to
just so
you do the
ridiculously
first
off.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So 5 minutes.
God, 5 minutes is so long, but okay.
Well, if you're faster, then you can just stop.
Okay. Jeff Bezos is a CEO, murderous CEO. First of all, you're pretty on point with that. I'm sure he murders some people. But also, that is such a ridiculous analogy, especially because if it's about the CEO and you should come vote, I would go and vote because I don't want him as my CEO. So even if we follow your analogy, I would go and vote because why would I want to keep him as a CEO? It's also different when it's an entire government and a specific person, because what you're talking about right now is some sort of monarchy or dictatorship that is very much different to work around. I would not go and vote against Putin because I would disappear randomly from the streets. But as we live in a democratic country that doesn't tend to do that with its citizens, usually, I would say, definitely does that with abroad, but that's its own thing. I would say that not going to vote is just a ridiculous way of dealing with a problem. Yeah. And just overall, I mean, yeah. I mean, the thing I don't understand is, do you want them to be murderers who steal? That's the thing I don't get, is why say the thing like, because if you don't go vote, then you've already said, let them do it, and I'm just gonna step back, and it's not my fault. You're the guy who looks at the bully at school and doesn't say anything and just watches him hit the bully. And yeah, you're not as bad as the bully, but looking at that guy is still very much bad, to say the very least. It is, yeah. Oh God, 3 more minutes. I can destroy you in 3 more minutes. Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard of herd immunity. Do you know what that is?
Am I allowed to talk?
Just say you can nod or.
Herd immunity. No, I don't know what it is.
Okay, so herd immunity is something used in vaccines. It's the idea that there's people who can't be vaccinated either for economical reasons sometimes, but a lot of the time for health reasons, because some people are allergic to certain vaccines.
Yeah.
The idea is that if Sonia here's allergic to vaccines, if the 3 of us get vaccinated for the flu, we are immuning her from the flu because none of us would get infected. That's the idea of herd immunity. And I think this idea very much applies to how voting works, because there's a lot of people who can't vote, including me. I've lived in this country for 7 years, and I'm not going to be able to vote for another 2 or 3. I can't even remember. There's people who have been criminalized for ridiculous things, especially things that are legal now, such as selling marijuana. A lot of them being racially targeted, even though it is not admitted publicly, but it is very apparent if you look at the statistics, targeting certain drugs that are more common amongst African-American communities and criminalizing them much more harshly than you would, let's say, a white person. So those people cannot vote for the rest of their lives because they've been to prison or jail. So now I feel like this is your duty as a citizen who can vote. Now, obviously, you don't have to talk to me and talk to someone who's been criminalized for selling weed to ask them to ask us what we want to vote for. But you should go, I think this is the best option, because you should think of yourself as a smart person who knows what they're doing. And you should be able to think of the best option to go vote for the betterness of everyone. I think it is very selfish to not vote if it does not affect you. On a totally other point, I know that there's this very common thing of like, why should I vote? Because either the person I want to get picked will get picked anyways, or the person that I don't want to get picked, or that person I want to get picked will never get picked. So 2 things about that is, if the person you want to get picked is going to get picked anyways, what if everyone who thinks that, who wants to vote for them, thinks that, so they don't go to vote? Then that person would not get picked. And that is definitely a ridiculous thing, but that has happened before, of people not getting elected because they were so sure that they would get elected that nobody went out to vote because they went, there's no way this guy doesn't make it. And on the flip side of that makes way more sense. If you want to vote and you go, the person I want to vote for will never make it. Well, the amount of votes people get actually changes the people who actually get picked's perception. If you're voting between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, if for some reason Bernie loses to 49% rather than 10%, Elizabeth Warren might look at what Bernie Sanders has done to try and emulate it, to try and appeal more to the mass.
Perfect 5 minutes. Okay, you ready?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Don't have to be that close.
Super good points. I think I'll just start. It seems like the overarching assumption that you're making is that it is possible to have government that if you just vote for the right government or set of officials, that you can have the desired outcome that you hope for or want. So I think I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And I also you're also having this assumption that people are well informed enough about politics to even know who to vote for in order to get these set of policies through that you're envisioning. So first of all, it's definitely the case, and there's many examples of this where governments do enact policies that have a net benefit on the public or population that they're governing. I would say that is not the norm, though. That's the exception, and that most public policies benefit a small group of people at the cost of a large group of people. So I think we really want to be careful and think through more closely that just voting is maybe not good enough, but we really want to make an informed vote. And so, first of all, people aren't really incentivized to be informed when they're voting because the amount of impact they have with their one vote is very, very little. And the amount of energy and time and resources you need to spend to be politically informed is quite, takes a lot of time, energy, and resources, is what I'm trying to say. So the result is that most people are politically uninformed, which I think we see everywhere. Also, there's a large amount, you have to kind of know economics in order to be politically informed, and most people don't know economics. So when we have policies like Social Security, for example, it seems like the kindergarten face value idea of Social Security is that great, we will allow old people to live a nice life. But I think if you dig more, Social Security is what we spend most of our taxes on, so I'm talking about this. But if you look more closely at that, it's really just a gigantic Ponzi scheme where you're stealing from people that are producing wealth right now in this country to give it to people that are not. So that's just one example of how lack of knowledge of economics is having voters who are politically uninformed and are not knowing economics are voting for these things that do not make sense economically and are not viable. Okay, so I got 2 more minutes. I want to go back to my first opening statement because I think that came across maybe as ridiculous. So I'm going to back up and just try that again. Maybe I'll say a couple different words. So what I'm trying to say is if there's a group of people that are killing other people and stealing from other people, we would intuitively, ethically, and morally want to distance ourselves from them as much as possible. We would not want to participate in anything that they're doing. If there's a chance that we could somehow all group together and stop them from killing people and stealing from people, we would want to do that. I'm not saying that we wouldn't want to do that. Unfortunately, the U.S. government has a monopoly on force and weapons. So it would be very, very unlikely for a bunch of citizens to be able to overthrow the U.S. military. It's the strongest military in the world. So instead of trying to take down these mass murderers, I would say let's just distance ourselves as much as possible from them, not participate in anything that they have going on for them right now. I think that's just ethically, intuitively a no-brainer. So maybe that helps. I would say probably the CEO Jeff Bezos thing wasn't that strong. What I meant by that was that we seem to have a bias towards political authority over private market authority, which I tried to illustrate there, but I guess that didn't work. I have 20 more seconds, so I'll try again real quick. Basically, it seems to me that if someone in government does something, that's ethically, morally more okay than if someone in the private markets do the same exact form of behavior. So I think if any government were to steal from people, that would be okay. But if any private company tried to steal from people, that would clearly not be okay.
Okay, so how do we proceed now?
I mean, I have things to say, but I don't know what the time frame would be and how it works.
I don't know. We didn't
Let's
really
just
see
keep
that.
going another round with 5 minutes.
I'm done.
I thought we had a questions time now.
We can do that.
Like I asked Lev a question maybe. Lev asked me a question.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we can do
do
that.
that.
And then you guys ask us a question.
So how much?
All right.
I mean, I'm
time
down to
should-
talk for 5 more minutes if you guys want to do that.
It was the
first.
same. Let's just do that.
5 more minutes? Okay.
Mhm.
All right,
Wait a
so-
sec. Okay. And go.
Okay. So I think it should be people's duty, if you can vote, to be informed how to vote. I think that should be your duty as a citizen. I think that's just a given in life. Just like because you live in this society, you need to make money to survive, which in itself isn't the greatest way to have a society. But as it currently stands, you should be informed. You're absolutely correct. There is no incentive to really be informed. But if you found out that there's somebody who wants to make some more incentives, you could vote for them. Or if you're super passionate about social security numbers or social security, you could vote for someone who promises to change that. Also, the fact that there isn't a difference between who is in charge, I think is absolutely wrong. I would say that regardless of who you support, having both Obama and Trump be presidents has been very different on the country for a plethora of reasons. And whoever you support, which you should support Obama out of the two, I think that you can clearly see that the government runs differently and acts differently depending who's running it. And yeah, there's still war, but it's a lot more complicated when it's just a group of people that you're hanging around with and entire countries that have been at war for decades. It is not that war is great, but it is a lot more complicated than just a group of people who murder. I will also say, what was the last point you made? God, I'm sorry. Yeah, go for it.
Oh, it was about a political bias towards their authority being a little bit more legitimate than private companies.
Yeah,
actions.
I'm trying to think. I have some time to think. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. So, my question, you said, as long as they're doing that, we'd want to distance ourselves, which is absolutely true. If my government just murdered people, just suddenly all of New York City was just murdered, I would want to distance myself from that government. That is absolutely correct. But my question is, what happens when your name gets drawn for who's going to die next? Because currently what you're describing is very similar to Nazi Germany, where people went, well, I'm not Jewish, so I'm not going to fight with the government. I'm just going to distance myself, hang around. Jews are going to get round up, but that's okay because I've distanced myself. I'm not killing Jews. I have nothing to do with the German government. And then at some point, possibly, depending on how privileged you are and how lucky you are, your name might get drawn next. And when your name gets drawn, there's not going to be anyone to defend you because everyone's already been gone because you watched them get taken. So I see where you're coming from, but distancing yourself from the government does not mean not to take action. I think the second you're distancing yourself without taking action, you are not distancing yourself. You are very much agreeing with what they're doing, not necessarily agreeing exactly with what they are doing, but it is not bad enough that you are willing to do anything against it or for it, which is crazy because a lot of people died and a lot of people are still dying at, let's say, ICE facilities at the border. Kids and moms are dying getting here. And if we keep having this president for another 4 years, then more will die and more awful things will happen. In California currently, he has decided that all homeless people will be rounded up and taken to a place in LA, which is very much concentration camp-y, if you will. We're getting there. And doing nothing is not distancing yourself, is actually agreeing with it enough to not take a stand. And yeah, you should vote. I mean, I don't need 50 more seconds. You can talk.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the last point was a little extreme. I don't think that we're quite at like Nazi Germany yet in the US. I do think that our government is responsible for so many deaths, but maybe not as severe as what happened in Nazi Germany. So yeah, I think I do get your point though, where if you're distancing yourself, that's kind of like doing nothing. So I think I need to add, like, I would need, maybe there's like a missing half of my argument or explanation where like I would need to say what would distancing yourself actually look like, along with not voting. What other actions would you take? But I'm not sure if that's relevant to our debate topic, but I guess I'll just talk about it anyway. So I would propose everyone stop paying taxes, and that would defund the government, and then eventually they would run out of money and be a lot less effective at killing people and stealing from people. So I think that would be a really, really good step. There are like technologies right now for currencies that are digital that make it very, very hard to tax. So I think continuing to develop technologies like that, it would be very helpful, because then we could have private transactions that are undetectable, and then we are not paying taxes. So yeah, I could maybe add a couple more examples, but I think I want to talk about your other things you said. So back to being incentivized to vote and politically informed enough to pick someone that will enact policies that will have the desired effect that you want. I think there's a couple things I want to say there. First off is that when you're running to be elected, someone whose objective is to just become elected will probably win over will probably beat other people whose objective is just trying to do the right thing or trying to make positive change. And that's because if your objective is to get elected, you can say whatever you like to get elected. You can be in the middle ground and get votes from both parties, or if you're in other countries and there's other parties. I don't know how many parties are in Austria, but in the US, 7. Okay, so yeah, so you could say things in the middle to get as many votes from as many party members as possible, if that's your objective to get elected. And you could lie, and you could say what you wanted to say, and that, in my opinion, is a much greater chance of that person being elected than someone whose objective is to be an honest person, because they can only tell the truth. So the liar could say anything that they want to get elected, so they could say everything that the truth sayer could say and lie, but the person who's just an honest person can only say the truth. So most of the time, liars get elected, I would say, who are also not incentivized to make these changes. They're incentivized to get reelected. So they're going to make decisions that are possibly not long-term optimizations, because if they were to enact policies that would affect changes outside of their term in office, then there's a chance that their competitor, the opposing party, would get the credit for that, and they would get nothing. Also, in general, in terms of just being incentivized to do the right thing, I would say in the private sector, that's the norm, where companies are incentivized to make their customers happy to stay in business, whereas politicians are incentivized to enact legislation, make changes that are often they receive very little benefit from these changes, and they also receive very little of the costs of these changes. So what they're actually deciding on impacts them very, very little, and which is completely the opposite. Like at Sarah Silks, for example, we had a mistake. We lost some money, and that was like a big blow this weekend because we lost literally like $5,000. But if a government actor loses $5,000, it's maybe a penny from everybody. Whereas at Sarah Silks, it's directly from Mike and Sarah's bank account. So yeah, just a couple examples of how on political markets, I'm out of time.
Okay, should we now question or?
Sure. Oops. I also think in the future we should probably debate something we both know a lot better.
Yeah.
Because I'm noticing we're both just like stumbling and like it's just not our fortes. You know what I mean?
I feel like I have a decent amount of knowledge on this.
Because I'm just lost. I mean,
You're lost?
I know that I'm morally right out of the two of us. It's just...
Wait, can I have my question?
Yeah, go for it. That's your question. Sorry.
Okay. So as an individual, if I don't agree with any party that is offering to be elected, but I do want to participate in the discussion and I want to change something because I highly disagree with how the country is run, what is my best option in terms of actions to take?
Mm-hmm.
Who should
You want to
start?
start?
I'll start.
Yeah.
So I'll start by saying that there's definitely towards the end when it's the final election, when there's only two people to pick from, specifically in the US, it is a lot harder to like both of them. But way before that, you have the primaries and you have like 15, 20 people wanting to be the Democratic representative or the Republican representative. And you vote who makes it to the next debate. Let's say this year, I don't know how much it started with, but let's say they started with 20 people. And if you get less than 2% of the votes, you will not make it to the next round of the debates, which is what has happened to, God, I don't remember her name. But a lot of people just slowly get dwindled off. I think if you don't like anyone from like 40 people, I think that is a much rarer case. I think it's definitely possible, but it is, yeah, I think it is borderline ignorant to just, I would be very surprised if someone who's paid attention and has followed it, the entire debates and everything has gone, I hate everybody here just off the bat. I just don't want to vote for any of them. So one is you should vote not just for the president. You should vote for propositions. You should vote for during the debates to get the person that you want elected to be the representative. So that's one option. If you hate everyone, I think you should probably do something. I think just saying, I don't like this, so I'm going to distance myself and that's my protest, I think is just kind of weak, honestly. Is like, if you think the system is so bad and you hate everyone, do something about it. You can, protest and free speech is a very common thing that is an option in the US.
Thank you. Same question to you.
Yeah. So last time I think I got the question wrong the first time, so I just want to make sure I got it right. The question is, it's okay. You can play it. The question is, what do I do if I don't like the way things are?
So basically what you've been talking about, right?
Yeah, but like, what do you do? What are your options if you're not voting for anyone? Or like, if you don't like anyone, what are your options?
I'll just repeat the question.
Oh,
so
yeah.
If I'm unhappy with how things are run in the country, but I do want to participate, I don't want to turn my back and just not vote, but I do want to change something actively and participate in the change process.
Yeah.
What are my action steps?
In the United States?
Yeah.
Yeah. The United States is a particularly unfortunate set of government like structures where we use this system called like the Electoral College to elect our president. And depending on how many people are in your state and how big it is, and a couple other things I don't really understand is how many electoral college votes each state gets. So in California, we get a decent amount, and it historically has like pretty much virtually always elected the Democratic candidate. So if you were to vote for anything other than the Democratic candidate, your vote would pretty much count for zero, like actually zero. So in this particular case, it's very difficult. I think Lev made a good couple suggestions about like, well, you could vote for smaller things like propositions and stuff like that. The way that works here is, I think it's different from Austria, but we don't actually vote on many of the laws. We elect somebody who votes on the laws for us. So you might have some success with trying to elect somebody who represents your voice a little bit better. Still, though, we run into this problem where you're not incentivized to be politically informed enough to even know who to elect to make decisions for you. So I would say just overall, this system has quite a bit of problems. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't work ever. It just means it most likely doesn't work. And I think just like how things are currently, what we're doing in the United States is a really good illustration of why this system doesn't work. And there's not a whole lot you can actually do to change things, which is unfortunate. Sorry. I have 3 more seconds, right? In Austria, everyone votes for every law, right? You don't have a okay, that's it. That's all I got.
Was that an answer to your question?
Yeah.
The answer is you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That was what I got.
So what do we do now?
I would like to ask Lev a question.
Sure, that sounds good.
Go for it.
Lev, would you like to ask a question first?
No, go for it.
Me? Okay. I feel like I started
Wait.
first, so
2 minutes or 3 minutes to answer to the question.
2 minutes.
how long do you need?
2 minutes for questions. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But you gotta
Ask.
Well, do you have any examples of politicians or maybe some policies that had the intended consequence that was desired when they were, I think that makes sense, right? Like, so if the intended consequence was less unemployment or more employment, sorry, do you have any examples of government policies that were enacted that did that? And I think employment's maybe a bad example because you can employ people that are doing non-productive jobs. So let me think if I can. Do you know what I mean, right? Yeah. So not like digging holes and filling them back in.
Yeah.
That would be one unproductive way to get people employed. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a little bit hard to answer because examples, as someone who's not really informed, is hard to come up with. But let's take something like Obamacare, which isn't the best thing in the world, but it is definitely more than what we've had in the past to help people who cannot afford their own insurance and healthcare. And that has been overturned since Trump has come into office. He promised things for healthcare to help people. And he did. Examples is very hard for me. So I'll hit you with an example question after this just to really get at you. But I'm sure, I can't answer the question authentically because I truly don't know. I can say, I'm sure that there's certain things that propositions that people voted on and the propositions really helped, but I cannot answer this authentically. That is absolutely correct. No, I have nothing else to say.
Okay. No, it's fine. That's a hard question.
No, it's a fair question.
Okay, your question.
Okay, my question. My question to you is, how is just not voting and not doing anything a protest against it? How is it not just a nice scapegoat to being ignorant?
I don't think my point is that it's a protest against it. It's just, my point is more like, if a group of people are doing morally and ethically wrong things, you wouldn't want to participate in what they're doing. That's my point. And the scapegoat part about like being, just about being ignorant. So how is not voting not a scapegoat, right? About not being ignorant. How is not voting? Or like, basically, I'm saying I want to distance myself. So is your scapegoat to just being ignorant? Oh, okay.
How is it not? Because I'm sure that you don't think that. So my question to you is, how is not voting not a scapegoat to being ignorant?
I think it can be a scapegoat to being ignorant. I mean, you're not really if you're not participating in something, you have no reason to know anything about it. So I think you you can be ignorant. That's not really a problem. The problem is just participating in things that are ethically wrong to do. So I would imagine that a lot of people that don't vote for this reason are also ignorant about a lot of things. Like, I don't know everything. I hardly know anything actually about what's going on in politics in the United States. So I'd say in a lot of ways I am ignorant. And I think choosing not to vote I think I might be a special case because like we have this debate right now. So I've been thinking about it a lot. But I probably would be more ignorant about a lot of things by choosing not to vote. So there's no real way of being informed if you're not participating in something, for sure. No. I don't have any that's right. That's a good question.
I have a 10-second closing statement.
Yeah. Kill it.
Let's see.
I mean, you don't have to give me 10 seconds. You can just give me however long. 30 seconds?
Let's just think.
Okay, cool.
10 seconds, okay.
So you're hanging around and there's a group of people who murder and steal and do awful things that none of us agree with. I would not want to distance myself at all. That sounds ridiculous. I would want to do something to stop them. I think that's the point, is if I'm seeing someone start to, let's say, sexually assault a woman, I would not go, I don't want to be associated with that guy whatsoever. I don't want to go to that alley. We should need more than 30 seconds.
Go. No, you are crushing. I said give him more. Give him more time.
Okay.
There you go. 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm seeing a woman get sexually assaulted in an alley, I would not go, I don't want to go to that alley and just by being in the vicinity be called a sexual assaulter myself. No, I want to go there and hit that guy and get police involved. And if we're in a society with no police, I would have to be the police, which is not a great way to do it. But I would not distance myself. I think it is my duty as a human being to try and better both my and other people's lives by being kind and compassionate and brave sometimes. Sorry, I'm starting to sound like a political speech, but I think distancing yourself is actually agreeing with what they're doing. If you see someone assaulting a woman and you just go, well, I don't want to be associated with them, and you keep walking, then you're actually agreeing with that person, rather than interjecting by casting a vote to vote against people assaulting women, which is a great vote. If that's ever a proposition, you should definitely vote for that. But yeah, I think distancing yourself is actually the agreeing and not actually doing anything that you're trying to convey.
So in this case, it's not really one man assaulting one woman. It's thousands of men with assault rifles against one woman. The U.S. has the biggest military, the strongest military in the world. So fighting a bunch of civilians fighting the strongest military in the world is pretty ridiculous and stupid. So I don't think your analogy is at all what we're talking about. So okay. So I guess my final conclusion thinking is that I find it very, very interesting that as someone who's so pro voting, you're so politically uninformed. I think.
I can't vote.
I think that's kind of maybe a sample size of one, so not the best data, but I think it is a strong case for the majority of people being politically uninformed. Maybe not a strong case if it's just one, but I think it's just an example then. You're not incentivized to know. And I think your case, since you literally can't vote, like you just said, is probably different. But the fact that you can't even think of one political policy other than Obamacare that had the desired, and you didn't even say that it had the desired effect. I think that's also possibly a red flag and worth thinking through more closely. I would suggest that the reason why you can't is because oftentimes policies don't have the intended outcome that politically uninformed voters think that they do, because their knowledge of economics and politics is very inadequate when it comes to making these massive, large-scale decisions on how we should organize human society.
Okay. And what now?
Can we bring, by the way, at some point your landlord here and have a debate about the AC?
Dude, it's so bad.
I think that'd make a great episode.
Okay, so here's where I think you really shine, Lev, is in hand-to-hand combat, back and forth hand-to-hand combat.
And
I think that you're...
we had like 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
It was like kind of awkward, especially because like we're not debaters.
Yeah.
Like
This is our first debate.
This is not what we do, and we've never done it before.
Yeah.
I think
It's almost like your brain is so fast that like you have to go when you have to go. You can't wait,
but
right?
that's not fair because other people should have the chance to finish their thoughts.
We could
but it might be
a moment
easier.
of that.
Yeah,
to
it
see
might
if we
be
get
easier
something
for us.
interesting.
So you can stop turning it. It's okay.
It's
Eva.
okay. Keep talking.
I think just considering that we're not debaters and we're just a couple of friends talking, I think it might be easier if it was more of a discussion than a debate.
Yeah. What do the judges say?
I
Yeah,
would say so.
I agree.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting for each of you to have 5 minutes, and it was very interesting to get like the consensus of each of you.
Yeah.
Like each of you managed to make their standpoints very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is that like they're still different and they still don't meet
Yeah. No, absolutely.
at all.
I will say about the analogy with the woman being assaulted, it's not suddenly, it's thousands of people with guns against just one woman. No, it's thousands of people with guns against millions of Hispanic and Black people. And we are the tens, if not hundreds of millions of citizens who are just watching, So it's not, you can't just, in the analogy, only scale up the assaulter while leave it as just one person and one woman. You need to scale up everything if you scale it up.
Sure. Yeah, so the strongest military in the world against like 300 million civilians. Yeah. That's what it is.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's still the same analogy.
Also, do you not think that the thousands of people in the military, the strongest military in the world, you don't think they're part of the civilians? Like, are you saying like they're just slaves? Like they will do anything that people tell them. Like they tell them to go and murder their own family, and they will because they're civilians, and civilians need to die if they protest.
Wait, I didn't quite get that.
Okay, so I'm in the army.
Yeah.
Okay. And my family's protesting. So Mr. Government tells me to go murder my family because we're the strongest military in the world and we're going against civilians. You think I'm going to do that? So my question is,
I don't know.
Is the military just a perfect, they're just like in a computer, you're playing StarCraft, moving people, they do exactly what you tell them? Or are the majority of the army also civilians?
They are obviously U.S. citizens, probably. So I feel like we're not really talking about.
They're people who. You need to get more than one mic.
Maybe we could lean forward a little bit, share the fun.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
We're all friends here.
Yeah. So I get that they're the strongest army in the world, but if the government is so awful, wouldn't the strongest army in the world go against its own government? Like, what makes you think that they're just just perfect pawns in the government's control.
I don't think I was making any of those claims. I was just saying that it's really unlikely that bunch of civilians can go overthrow the government, that a government that has the strongest military in the world. That's
But what
all
makes them have the strongest military in the world? What I get that
I
it's
don't know
theirs,
really.
but
Like, they
what
have
makes it
good
theirs?
weapons. Like,
No, not what makes them the strongest. What makes it our governments? I mean, it clearly is our governments legally, but
Yeah.
just like civilians can't legally overthrow the government, legal issues aren't really the problem here because we can't overthrow them regardless. Even if we were stronger for some reason, legally we would break the law if we overthrew the government. But that's the whole point of overthrowing the government. Why wouldn't the army join the civilians? Why would they specifically listen to a bunch of white rich dudes in the government?
I'm not sure if they're like the color of their skin or like how much money they have has anything to do with it. But yeah, again, I think it's unlikely that a bunch of people can come together and beat the strongest military in the world.
But why do they need to beat them? Why would the military not join them? If the government is so awful, why would the military agree with the government and not join the civilians? Because they're their own thinking human beings like me and you.
Yeah, this just goes back to the point of I'm saying you shouldn't vote because you just want to have nothing to do with this group of people that kill people, and you're saying that you should try to overthrow them, and I'm saying it's very unlikely for people that don't have any weapons or combat experience to overthrow the strongest military in the world. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But you're just talking like this.
Yeah.
I feel like you're asking me questions that aren't relevant.
The thing is,
I didn't say anything.
No, but you keep saying, how would we overthrow the military? And I'm saying,
I didn't say that.
No, I'm saying, how could we beat the strongest military in the world? You say that.
I'm not. I'm saying it's really unlikely that a bunch of people can beat the U.S. military.
And I'm saying, well, what makes you think that we need to? Why would they be against us, the military? That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, I'm just replying to what you said about sexually assaulting that woman. I'm
not asking you about sexually assaulting that woman. I'm asking you this question that you should answer straight. What makes you think that we need to overthrow, or that us civilians need to beat the U.S. Army? Why would they not join us?
I don't think that.
Oh, so so the U.S. Army isn't even a problem, is what you're saying?
No, it is.
Oh, well, so if it is, why is it? Why would they not join us?
Okay, wait. Can you ask the full question again?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're saying that it is very unlikely for us as civilians to beat the strongest army in the world, that's what you're saying? So we're clear here. You think us as civilians, if we try to overthrow the government, it would be very hard for us to beat the strongest army in the world, correct?
Yeah.
So my question to you is, what makes you think that the strongest army in the world will be in our way and not actually join us?
I don't know. Maybe they will join us.
Okay.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
If you look at history itself, you can see that military usually joins the people. That happened a couple times in Austria. I'm pretty sure that happened a couple times in every other country in the world.
Okay. I didn't know.
Soon as there's a group of people that actually want to overthrow the government because the government is bad, the military helps. That was pretty much always the case. Right now, in Austria. Right
Austria,
look at Russia, look at France.
Yeah, there are so many occasions where exactly that happens. The only occasion, do you say occasion?
Yeah.
The only occasion that I know of that right now happens where it's the opposite is in Hong Kong. But that's pretty much the only time I heard about the military actually fighting civilians when the civilians wanted to overthrow the government. That's the only case I know of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But if you look at history, you can see that pretty much every time that happens, the military joins the people and all of them together overthrow the government and build a new one.
Okay. Yeah.
So, okay. So if you have something to say, go for it, but I have another question.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to say.
Okay.
I didn't know that. I'm not sure if they would join or not.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Yeah.
My other question is, do you think that during World War II, America should not have stepped in because Germany was just taking over Europe? So we don't want to associate ourselves with Germany and those awful people. So we should have just distanced ourselves and stayed in the US. I mean, I'm saying ourselves. I wasn't born and I'm also not from this country. But yeah.
Yeah. I don't know anything really about World War II, so I don't know. Sorry.
Quick history lesson. So it was actually the USA that stopped Germany from, that freed Germany. Let's put it that way, and ended the war.
Alongside with the British and some other people, but the US was a massive part of that. of stopping Nazi Germany, if you will. So do you think they should have just actually not stepped in and distanced themselves, going, we should not participate in this?
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know enough about the circumstances of World War II, unfortunately. I wish I had a better answer.
Are you in support of World War II? I'm just to be clear.
I'm against humans killing other humans.
Okay, great.
I think we should not kill each other. Ever.
But you're saying if humans are killing other humans, we should just step back and leave.
Unless there's a plausible chance of these other humans being able to make a successful change, then yeah.
Are you saying there's not a plausible chance that we could overthrow this government? Not that you should.
Yeah. I would say
Yeah.
Let's go.
yeah, with force we probably couldn't, but if we stop paying taxes, there might be a chance.
Why not with force?
Well, I feel like it just goes back to that military thing, and yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you think that it's okay to take from one group of people some things and give it to another group of people?
I'm not so sure if that question has anything to do with the question of the podcast.
But I will answer
the
that.
military?
I will answer that. I will answer that. So,
Okay.
yeah. Do I think it's okay to take from one group of people and give it to another group of people? Yeah, I think it's absolutely okay. I think under obviously certain circumstances and context, it's not just like we just steal and give it to the other people. But I think if Jeff Bezos makes $2 billion a week, which I'm sure he works a lot and very hard, there's no way that he works enough to have earned $2 billion a week. And for him to make that, I think if you take $1 million out of that and give it to people who can't afford college or can't afford food or electricity, in a regulated way that isn't just like, I feel like giving this guy food, so I'm going to take from you, in a regulated way, I think that is absolutely okay. I think that makes total sense.
Yeah. So this is actually a really good, we could maybe have another episode 002 about this, about making money. Because I think that you're really passionate about that, which is awesome. But would there be maybe some situations where you're not a multi-billionaire that it would be okay to take? Like, would it be okay to take like 25% of everything that I make? Would that be okay? Because I don't make that much money. Like, is that okay? Against my will? Like, I would say, like, please don't take this money from me. Because say maybe I only make like $40,000 a year, and you take $10,000 from that. Is that okay? Even though I say, please don't steal from me.
Yeah. I just want to say, so I think that's not okay. I think in the government that we currently have, where they're trying to tax the rich as least as possible while taxing us a lot, I think that is a massive problem. And there's definitely current people who are trying to run for president in 2020 that are trying to tax the rich much more heavily, the billionaires, because those do exist among us. To tax them a lot and tax us less and less and less, because it is very disproportionate. So I absolutely agree with you. When it comes to billionaires, it is an outlier, but they should be taxed a lot more. And when it comes to us, we should be taxed less. And that's why you should vote, because there's certain people who are agree with your position. Absolutely. A lot of the things that you say, a lot of people agree with, which is why there's certain people who are running with your mindset, which is why you should vote for them. Because
do you have any examples of those people?
I mean, Texas specifically, like Bernie Sanders, I'm sure Elizabeth Warren as well, but more your stances, I don't know.
So yeah, socialism is not really my cup of tea. So I would say that I probably don't have my ideas.
Socialism isn't your cup of tea.
That's another topic. Like, that's a huge topic.
Yeah. No,
and I think that's the main problem in this discussion.
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm more of a
it
socialist
is the
and you're
main
more of a
problem
capitalist.
because you wanna change stuff, and he wants to overthrow the whole thing because he doesn't like the system. So that's a totally different topic.
That's true. Yeah.
It's okay. You wanted to wrap up?
No, I think the judges should decide.
You wanted to wrap up?
Should we decide?
I mean, I will say from my point of view, first of all, it's not very fair because they're very biased towards my.
That's okay. I agree to this.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I will say that they're very biased. I will say that I think debate wise, like how the debate went, I think we're very even.
Okay.
I think if it was the same debate with two people more informed for both positions, I think my side would easily win. And I know that's like such a shitty thing to say
No, you're fine.
because it just goes like in a hypothetical situation I would win,
all
but
good.
it's like, yeah, I think debate wise it went very even. But I definitely didn't bring my A game. Yeah, go for it.
Unless Sonia, you wanted to say something before?
No, it was just really interesting because both of you had trouble answering very specific questions. But when it comes to the central question, which is why should you vote? In my perception, you had a wall in front of you at some point where you couldn't answer the question of how not participating is making anything better. And until now, I haven't gotten an answer to that specific question. And that was your main argument. So that's why I would say that Lev won, because he had very strong arguments regarding the specific question.
But he didn't really answer a question too, either.
I said you should vote for propositions or
Yeah, but the question was, what do you do if you don't want to participate in that stuff? So what's your...
She said if you don't like anyone, is what she asked me. If you don't like
Yeah,
anyone...
but what do you do then?
What
So
do
I'm
you
saying-
do that?
So first of all, I said I'd be very surprised if you don't like any one out of the 40 people who are up for possible presidency. I'd be very surprised. But if you do, then this country is very pro free speech and protesting, and you should take a stance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got an answer from him.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why
I think it's pretty much the only thing where you didn't give any direct answer to what would you do other than, like, what would you do in that scenario?
In the scenario of not voting?
In the scenario that you don't like any of them.
Oh, answering to her
Yeah,
question.
which you
yeah.
didn't
So,
really-
I
you were
was
just-
talking about this question, like the central question.
oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I had a question, you had a question.
No, but she's talking about that question.
Because
Yeah,
we're
but
talking
wasn't
about
that
who
the question?
won the debate. So it's
Yeah.
about who answered this question better. And he had an argument that
Yeah, that's true.
just ran against the wall. His argument just hit a wall and he couldn't argue for it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Whereas Lev,
The wall,
Kept-
where was the wall? Sorry to interrupt.
where you couldn't say
Border
what
of
the
Mexico. Sorry.
where you couldn't say why it's better not to vote. You had your one argument where you said that you don't want to have anything to do with people who murder other people.
Yeah.
But once he counterclaimed that, you couldn't counterclaim him. Like he counterclaimed that by saying that it's basically looking away and agreeing with what they're doing.
Okay.
And you didn't have anything against. That.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Okay.
So that's where it kind of dissolved itself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why for me, Lev won.
I would say, like what you said, it was pretty even. And other than that, it's only that part, but I don't think it's that big a deal, so I don't really know.
Well, it's the central question.
Yeah, that's true.
Should you vote
And
or not?
I
And
would
then
say,
you argue, and there was only one argument on this side. And there was...
well, yeah, if you put it like that, it's obvious. But I would say it's not, like, it was okay. Like, there was obvious, like, both said that they could have researched more, and I mean, we don't even know, like, how the US works at all, kind of, like, only from TV and stuff, because in Europe it's totally different. And yeah, I think the underlying problem is that you don't believe in the government itself, so that's why you couldn't counterclaim what he said, because the system itself you dislike. So there's no way for you to think of a way that would be better than not voting. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, the debate
So-
would have been better if it was like, should we have a government? Could have been
Yeah.
like a better debate.
Yeah. So
Because your point was, I don't want a government because I don't want to vote because I don't want a government. While
yeah.
which is like its own discussion. It might have worked better if it was like, should we have a government or not?
Yeah.
But I know you're like a fan of anarchy.
Yeah, but that also is a different topic.
Yeah, of course.
That's for another day. Yeah, but so.
But
I would
it's like
just-
the underlying...
I'm okay with
Yeah.
losing this then for those reasons. I think that.
Yeah, I
That's,
think those are
that's
pretty much
okay.
the only reasons.
I would like to say that Lev had a lot of like you should votes because, and then appealed to like some internal like sense of, I would say, political bias that I feel like you three all have. And
What is that political bias?
I would say that, and I could be wrong, that all three of you have a tendency to give more weight than you should to government. And so when you said a lot of times you just should vote, like you should vote because like you just should.
But aren't you giving the most weight to the government? But aren't you giving the most weight to the government by saying that we can't do anything, we can't overthrow them, they kill, and we can't do anything about it? Aren't you giving the most weight? I'm not giving them any weight. I'm giving weight to our votes as people.
Yeah, well, I did say that we could stop paying taxes and that could work. But I think what I meant is that there's this bias towards government being a necessary element of our lives that all three of you guys are. Yeah, you can.
No. I just agree. I wasn't gonna respond.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's all good. It just seemed like there was a lot of you just should vote kind of action going on over there that I felt like there was no real strong follow up, but I do feel like it had like some persuasive power.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Because I just want to say that comes back to the anarchy versus like government or no government thing.
Yeah,
because
correct.
Yeah.
It's more because if you don't think we should have a government, then of course me saying you should vote is already against everything that you're going for because you don't think there's a government. So I'd say should you vote is a pretty like big question, but compared to whether you should have a government or not, it's much more micro than the macro question of should you have a government or not. So if I'm going towards should you vote or not, and you're coming from this place of we shouldn't have a government, it's a little bit more difficult for both of us to make our point clear to the other one.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to say. Just a little.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. Yep.
Well, okay. Wrap it up. Wrap it up, bro.
Oh, you have to vote now, right? Is that
Yeah, I have to vote in 2020.
No.
Oh man,
You vote in 2020.
who am I gonna vote for?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter anyway, according to you.
Wait, you're not a U.S. citizen, so
No.
maybe I could though.
I can never.
Oh,
run
can
for
you
president.
vote? Wait, how does that work? Can you?
never vote?
I can never run for president.
Oh,
So
yeah,
if you
that's
get
true.
a-
But
I
could
can't
I run for
I can't get elected.
elections
No.
and you could vote me?
You're a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll vote for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but were you born in this country?
Oh no, you have
No.
to be born here.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
be born in the U.S. to be
Yep.
be president.
Oh,
You can
that sucks.
get governor tops like every Austrian people, like Schwarzenegger and stuff.
But
So I have to.
out of the four of us, you're the only one who could run for president here, Josh.
That's true.
So if you want to
Big
make a change, if you want to make a difference without voting, because you don't have to vote when you're president, I think you can't vote if you're running for
Juicy
president.
for president.
Unfortunately, if I have to vote, that means I have to engage in murdering with a murdering
No, you don't have
group
to
of
vote.
people. You said I have to.
No, I'm
vote?
saying if you're running, you can't vote.
No, he means now, like
2020
after this debate.
because I lost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to vote if you don't want to, but like,
Well,
you should if you want to be a
Josh.
good person.
Josh, you're already engaging
By
with
just paying
the
taxes.
murders by
Yeah.
living here and paying taxes and being part of the society.
Yeah.
So I think you should publicly go and say on this
So-
video that you will never pay taxes again, and you should publicly say that now.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like you get locked up in a jail cell if you don't. So.
So actually, the part that you're refusing to be part of this on is voting, which is the only part where you actually get a say in changing things.
Yeah.
Is what confuses me. You take part in everything, but living here, paying taxes,
Yeah.
using the medical care,
Yeah.
using the streets
Or the
and
lack
bridges and or the lack of
Yeah.
Using the rules.
using the rules.
The
But the only
society.
part that you refuse to take part in is the one where actually your opinion counts.
Yeah. Well, it's the one where I don't get locked in a cage.
Yeah,
So I don't want to be locked in a cage because I think that's wrong.
but you already are.
Why not build a house? Why not build a cabin in the woods, and like,
Well, if you
because that's distancing yourself. Because living here and not voting is not distancing yourself. It is riding on the privilege that you have for whatever reason, and enjoying this life or not, maybe depending on how the laws here work and affect you. But if you want to distance yourself, go to Montana, build a cabin in the woods, and like never come out.
Yeah, or maybe the better way is to make more videos like this and explain my point of view.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is better than not voting. Absolutely. This I agree with you.
Yeah.
If you have the option of not voting or not voting and doing this, you should absolutely do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can just change like one person's mind.
Yeah. So 2 people.
Obviously not yours.
No, it's way more than 2 people. It's like tens of millions who don't vote. But yeah.
But I would say in this case, it's about so much more than not voting.
Yeah, that's
like
that
it's
really
actually
is the
not.
problem.
It's not about the voting part in the end because it's about getting rid of the government.
Yeah.
That's
Maybe
what
the
it's
topic
about.
for debate wasn't quite
Yeah.
on point.
Which isn't fair to you
Yeah.
because if we're trying to debate whether you should vote or not, and you have this much bigger stance, then for you to make your point is a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
Which isn't fair to the debate. Like I won just because I was debating this topic. While you were still debating it, you were talking about much more of a macro issue.
Yeah, that's right.
I think this is a good example of how we're so locked into this idea that we need a government that me saying these words felt like it was outside of the topic of debate when it is should you vote, and I'm saying no and I'm giving these reasons. You guys felt like these reasons are so far off, and I think that is political bias towards needing a government. You guys are so entrenched in this idea.
I don't think political bias to the. I think it's just bias towards the question. I think if the question was should we have a government, then the debate could flow much more easily. But if I said you should vote because democratic governments are the best thing, then that's not really an argument because suddenly we're talking about the government again. You see, if it was the other way, if you were going you shouldn't vote because it affects people, if you tackled the question and all I said was you should vote because democracy is the best kind of way to run a government, then you would win just off the fact that I was not debating the question.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Kinda. So you're saying that I could have got it different. I could have had like a different. I could have like. No, I don't really get it actually.
Okay, so let me try and explain it in a better way because, yeah, I think. I mean, definitely you're absolutely right. We do have a bias against not having a government, but I think if that was the debate, then that's the whole point: is that we have a debate about our biases, whether you should or should not have a government. But when the question is this question, should you vote, inherently means that there is a democratic government. That's the problem, is that question states that there is a democratic government. So the second that is it goes into our bias anyways. If the question would be something like, I'm trying to think of like an anarchist question. Should we be allowed to steal from others if we're stronger? Or I don't know. But like, if that was the question, then that question inherently means that we don't really have a government or laws to govern this. If the question was like, if there were no laws, should we be allowed to steal if we're stronger? Then suddenly we're talking in this no government world. And then that was not a great way to explain it either. I'm trying to think.
I think that was a good explanation.
Yeah, no, it was definitely more complicated than the first one, so it's not that great. Yeah.
I'm not. I mean, I think maybe I kind of get it, but
I think the question is biased towards us. I that's what I'm saying. I think this question is biased towards us because of our viewpoints. If you thought that we should have a democratic government, but that voting is bad, then the question would be fair for both of us because both of us agree we should have a democratic government, and then our disagreement is about this question. While the way it's set up right now, because you think that we should have a government overall, it actually means that you're at a disadvantage from the get-go because the question is about having a government.
Yeah.
How do you have a democratic government without voting?
You don't. That's the thing. That's why. But
that's where I felt like I had to.
Yeah, but then the question should not have been about voting. The question should have been about should we have a democratic government? Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question was just biased against you for your viewpoint, which sucks.
Could be. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I could have done a better job debating it. So.
Yeah, but so could I. I'm saying like I think the question was biased against you. Yeah.
Yeah, because if there would be a society with your ideal form, then there would be no votes anyway. So
Yeah, there wouldn't be voting, and then
Because you don't need
and then this
votes.
question doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
If there's anarchy, you don't need votes.
Yeah. And let's say that's the government that we lived in, then you would automatically win because there's no point to this question. You'd be like,
Yeah.
well, why should you vote if nobody's going to count them up and pick someone? You know? So it was. I think the question was biased towards my opinion.
Could be.
Yeah. I mean, I'm literally telling you that.
I set myself up to vote for failure.
Yeah, I'm literally like telling you that you lost because the question was unfair. I'm not trying to be like we're
That's
right.
exactly what I meant with the bubble. Like we're discussing within this bubble,
Yeah.
and you're discussing outside of the bubble.
Yeah. And if we just expanded the bubble by making the question a little bit bigger, then it would have been a lot easier for both of us to make much more concrete points.
Yeah.
And I also think it would have been easier for us in general because we're talking much more morally than like logistically about like specific propositions. So if we had expanded the bubble to like whether we should do anarchy or socialism or whatever, democracy or I think just in general, it would have been easier for us because it's because we're talking much more morally than we are talking about statistics.
Well, I think just my entire argument is just based on moral, ethical intuitionisms about what you should and shouldn't do to people.
I think both of our arguments are like that because both of us aren't like super informed specifically about voting in politics. I mean, I was trying to do some more specific stuff, but like even for me, it was much more of a moral, intuitive thing. And this question is not a moral, intuitive question. It is. It is, but I think it is much more like logistics, statistics based of like how much people vote and how much votes go to each place and who doesn't vote and what does it do when people don't vote. And it's much more like that. While if it's should we have a government or anarchy or different things, then that's much more of like
Dang, it's unfortunate because I had a set of arguments more for what you just said, and I was testing them on Sonia and Noah last night, and I think Noah convinced me to use these moral ethical arguments over the efficiency statistic arguments. So maybe I could have gone the other route with a little bit more effectiveness.
possibly definitely against me considering I had nothing of that sort.
Cool. Well, I feel like we are just talking forever now, so we should we're done.
Wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. This was our first episode of you know, I announced it in the beginning.
Curious Growth Cast.
Curious Growth Cast.
CGC.
Kind of sounds like Curious George. But yeah.
Curious Growth Cast.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.
Cool.
Awesome.
We could even, like, on YouTube, you can have votes, right?
What?
Can you?
Let
Polls?
polls,
Oh.
on videos.
Should you vote?
I mean, the thing is,
not that, but who won, like this?
Oh, okay.
what I do think is that
Come on.